The missing persons database flagged the file because of a photograph, and I almost didn't open it because the case was 10 years cold and the name on the folder was my own. My name is Sarah Voss, and for the last 6 years I've worked as a cold case analyst for the State Bureau. It's a quiet job, a paper-pushing job. I sit in a cubicle on the 4th floor of a building that smells like recycled air and old coffee, and I sift through the tragedy of strangers. I look for patterns, for missed connections, for the one overlooked detail that might give a family closure. I'm good at it. I have to be because my own family never got that closure. My brother Daniel vanished on a Tuesday in the fall of 2014. He was 19, a sophomore at a state college 2 hours north of our hometown. He wasn't a runaway. He had a girlfriend, a part-time job at a campus bookstore, and a stack of unpaid parking tickets that suggested he planned on being there for a long time. He went to a party off campus on a Friday night. His phone pinged a cell tower near a stretch of rural highway at 2:47 a.m. Then nothing. No calls, no texts, no credit card activity. The car he'd borrowed from our dad was found 3 days later, parked neatly in the lot of a defunct rest stop. The keys were in the ignition. His jacket was folded on the passenger seat, his wallet still in the pocket. It was like he just stepped out of his life and evaporated. I've spent 10 years trying to find a reason. I've interviewed his friends until they stopped taking my calls. I've walked the highway shoulder where his signal died, listening for something. A whisper, a memory, anything. I've charted the geography of that whole county until I know it better than the town I grew up in. And when the State Bureau finally hired me, I told myself it was a way to channel the grief into purpose. I would find other people's missing, because I couldn't find my own. But the system flagged that file this morning, and the flag was for a new photo added to the evidence log. The photo was taken by a wildlife camera mounted on a deer trail in a state forest about 40 miles from where Daniel disappeared. The camera had been there for years, its memory card only recently pulled by a ranger, and the timestamp on the photo was from October 26, 2014, the night my brother vanished. The image was grainy, washed out by the green filter of night vision. It showed the usual forest detritus, a fallen log, some underbrush, the silver gleam of a stream in the background. And in the center, standing perfectly still, was a figure. The figure was facing away from the camera, shoulders hunched, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. The build was right. The height was right. And on the back of the hoodie, almost obscured by the shadows, was the faint, peeling decal of a band logo, a local band called the Hollow Pines that Daniel had seen live 3 times. My breath caught in my throat. I zoomed in, pixelating the image until it was just a smudge of green and black. But I knew that hoodie. I'd bought it for him for his birthday that year. I'd stood in line at the merch table while he chatted up the bass player. I'd washed it a dozen times and watched the decal crack and fade. I sat there in my cubicle, the hum of the fluorescent lights suddenly deafening, and I felt a coldness spread from my stomach to my fingertips. It wasn't fear. It was something worse. It was hope, twisted and ugly, because the figure in that photo wasn't just walking into the woods. It was walking into the underbrush, straight toward a thicket of thorny blackberry bushes that, according to the topographical map I had pulled up on my second monitor, led directly to a deep, forgotten limestone sinkhole. We never searched that area. It was too dense, too overgrown, and the ground was unstable. It wasn't on the original grid search. No one thought to look there. The story writes itself, doesn't it? Grieving sister uncovers missed clue, finds her brother's remains, gets closure. It's the narrative I've been chasing for a decade. But as I stared at the photo, something felt wrong. The figure was too still. A deer or a hiker would have been caught mid-stride, or at least slightly blurred. This figure was posed as if it knew the camera was there and had stopped intentionally. And the posture, the way the shoulders were hunched, the head tilted slightly to one side, it wasn't a posture of someone walking. It was the posture of someone listening. I checked the case notes for that night. Daniel's last known contact was a text to his girlfriend. "Getting a ride, gonna be late." He never said who the ride was from. The cell tower ping was the only trace of him. I pulled up the satellite imagery of the sinkhole location. It was a dark, mossy pit, maybe 40 feet deep, with a small opening that led into a wider underground cavern. It was the kind of place that swallowed sound. The ranger who pulled the card was a man named Billsley. I called him, my voice steady, my hands shaking under the desk. I asked him if he'd checked the camera's settings. He said he hadn't. The battery was dead, and it was just a lucky break the card still held data. He told me the camera was motion-activated, with a range of about 40 feet, and that it had a small red indicator light that blinked when it took a picture. I asked him if a person standing 30 feet away would see that light. He paused for a long moment, and I could hear him thinking. In the dark, yeah, if they were looking right at it. I looked back at the photo on my screen. The figure was at the edge of the frame, maybe 25 feet from the lens. Its head was turned, not toward the camera, but slightly past it, as if looking at something beyond the clearing. Something I couldn't see. I took the next 3 days off. I didn't tell my supervisor where I was going. I drove north on a Tuesday morning, the sky a flat, oppressive gray. The highway was empty, and the radio kept cutting out as I got closer to the forest, leaving only the hiss of static and the low hum of the engine. I'd made this drive 100 times, but it had never felt like this. The trees on either side of the road seemed to lean inward, their branches scraping against the roof of my car like long, skeletal fingers. I parked at the trailhead. The air was cold and damp, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine. The silence was absolute, a heavy blanket that deadened every noise. Even the crunch of my boots on the fallen leaves was muffled. I had the printed satellite map and a handheld GPS, but I didn't need them. I'd studied the topography so long I could feel the slope of the land in my feet. It took me 40 minutes to find the sinkhole. It was tucked behind a wall of blackberry brambles, barely visible until you were right on top of it. The opening was a jagged gash in the earth, about 6 feet across, leading down into darkness. The air coming out of it was cold and stale, like breath from a tomb. I knelt at the edge, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had a flashlight in my pack. I took it out. I clicked it on. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing wet limestone walls and a floor of packed clay and debris. And there in the center of that pit, half buried under a layer of leaves and sediment, was a shoe. A single, worn, white sneaker. The same brand Daniel wore. The relief that flooded through me was so powerful it made me dizzy. I almost laughed. I almost cried. I found him. After all these years, I found him. I scrambled to find a safe way down, my mind already racing ahead to the phone call I would make to my parents, to the quiet funeral we would finally be able to have. That's when the sound started. It wasn't from the pit. It was from behind me, from the trees. It was a low, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat, but slower. And with it a faint, wet rustling like something dragging itself through the leaves. I froze, the flashlight still pointed down into the hole. I tried to tell myself it was a deer, a raccoon, a bear even. I tried to make my body move, to turn around, but it was like the sound had pinned me in place. The thumping got closer, pulsing in the silence, and I could feel the vibration of it through the ground under my knees. Then the sound stopped, and a voice said my name. It was soft, almost a whisper, and it came from directly behind me. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a greeting. It was a statement of fact, a confirmation, as if the speaker had been searching for the right name to attach to me and had finally found it. I turned my head. The figure from the photograph was standing at the edge of the blackberry thicket, maybe 15 feet away. It was tall and gaunt, wearing the same dark hoodie, the same jeans, but they were faded and stained with dirt, hanging off a frame that was too thin. The hood was up, casting the face in shadow. But I could see the outline of a jaw, the pale glint of a cheekbone. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, breathing slowly, its chest rising and falling under the grimy fabric. And I realized with a horrible, creeping certainty that the camera had gotten the postures backward. It hadn't been walking away from the camera. It had been walking toward it, toward the edge of the frame where I couldn't see. And the thing in the sinkhole, the shoe, the remains I'd been so desperate to find, that wasn't Daniel. That was the last person who had seen Daniel. The figure took a step forward, its head tilting to the other side, the same listening posture from the photo. And in that instant, I understood the whole case. Daniel hadn't vanished. He had been taken to a place without signal, without roads, without witnesses. And this thing, this creature that wore the shape of a man, it didn't hunt in the woods. It waited there in the quiet places, and it used the memory of the missing to lure the searchers. It used me. I started to back away from the sinkhole, my feet slipping on the wet leaves. The flashlight fell from my hand, clattering against the rocks, the beam spinning wildly, casting monstrous shadows across the trees. The figure took another step. Its hands emerged from the pockets of the hoodie. They were pale, impossibly long, with fingers that seemed to have too many joints. "Sarah," it said again, and this time the voice was clearer right behind my ear, even though the figure was still 10 feet away. It sounded like my own voice, just a shade deeper. "It's time to come home." I ran. I don't remember the trail, only the tearing branches and the cold air burning my lungs. I made it to my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands slick with sweat. I didn't look in the rearview mirror until I was back on the highway, and when I did, all I saw was the empty road behind me stretching into darkness. I filed my report. I wrote that the search was inconclusive, that the sinkhole was unstable, that a full excavation crew would be needed. I requested a transfer to a different division. I moved apartments. I changed my number, but the photo is still in the system. And at night, when I close my eyes, I see the figure standing in the green glow of the camera, and I realize I never actually saw its face. I only saw the hood and the curve of a shoulder and the way it stood, perfectly still, waiting. I thought I was investigating the case, but the case was investigating me. And the photograph from the wildlife camera wasn't evidence. It was bait.